There's a special kind of disappointment reserved for when a story you love is taken apart and reassembled into something hollow. For many fans of Stephen King's It, that's exactly what HBO's new prequel series, It, Welcome to Derry, delivers. A half-baked attempt to capitalize on the legacy of a modern horror masterpiece. When the show was first announced, expectations were high. After all, King's original 1986 novel remains one of his most ambitious. And Andy Muschietti's two-part film adaptation earned over $1 billion at the global box office. The promise of a series expanding on that chilling mythology seemed irresistible. But when Welcome to Derry premiered this Sunday, that promise curdled into frustration. Instead of peeling back the layers of King's universe, the show ends up flattening it, a misguided blend of over-explained lore, muddled plotting, and self-serious tone that drains away everything that made it terrifying in the first place. King's It was never just about a killer clown. It was about childhood fear, the fragility of memory, and the courage it takes to face the darkness that grows with us. The book's sprawling, interwoven timelines, 1957 and 1984, explored how trauma echoes through generations. Muschietti's films modernized those timelines, setting The Losers Club in the late 1980s and their adult reunion in the 2010s, balancing nostalgia with emotional heft. What the films left behind were the rich historical interludes that fleshed out Derry as a cursed town, where evil doesn't just visit, it lives and breathes. Fans imagined Welcome to Derry might bring those stories to life. The Black Spot Fire, the Kitchener Ironworks explosion, or the haunting massacre of the Bradley Gang. Each event was ripe for adaptation. Slices of American horror soaked in King's signature blend of realism and nightmare. But rather than embracing these chilling opportunities, the series chooses to expand on something far less compelling: the cosmic backstory of It itself. Set in 1962, Welcome to Derry attempts to stitch together the mythos behind Pennywise's origins, offering an explanation that's both unnecessary and, frankly, absurd. The series situates itself roughly 27 years before the events of the first It movie, positioning the creature's reawakening against a backdrop of Cold War paranoia. In theory, it could have been an intriguing setup, horror as a metaphor for fear during an anxious era. But in practice, it's a tonal mess. The writers inexplicably involve the U.S. Air Force, which becomes aware of the entity lurking beneath Derry and attempts to harness it as a weapon against the Soviet Union. That's right. The military wants to capture Pennywise. It's a premise so far removed from King's psychological terror that it feels like parody. The supernatural evil that once thrived on childhood dread is now treated like a science project gone wrong. The absurdity doesn't stop there. The story introduces Major Leroy Hanlon, played by Jovan Adipo, a decorated African-American war hero, who, due to a combat injury to his amygdala, is physically incapable of feeling fear. It's an interesting concept, but one that feels jarringly out of place in a series about a creature that literally feeds on fear. Alongside him, the Air Force becomes entangled with a local Native American tribe, whose ancestral duty, we're told, is to contain the monster. On paper, this might sound mythologically rich, but on screen, it plays out as clumsy and dated. The show's depiction of indigenous culture feels shallow and stereotypical, echoing tropes that would have seemed outdated even in 1962. For a story meant to explore the roots of evil, Welcome to Derry instead finds itself stuck in the mud of cliché. Neither scary nor smart enough to justify its existence. By the time the show reaches its midpoint, it's clear that its creators are more interested in spectacle than story. The pacing lurches between scattered horror set pieces and long, self-important monologues about destiny, power, and fear. There are moments, fleeting ones, when the show remembers that it's supposed to frighten us. A few of its practical effects are gruesome, and the glimpses of Pennywise that do appear are suitably nightmarish. But they're buried beneath a narrative that confuses complexity with convolution. The writers seem determined to explain every mystery King wisely left untouched. The cosmic origins of the creature, hinted at in the novel through surreal flashes of interdimensional weirdness, are stretched into an overwrought mythology involving government cover-ups, psychic visions, and pseudo-scientific experiments. In trying to make it make sense, Welcome to Derry forgets that what made it terrifying was the very fact that it didn't. That's not to say the production lacks talent. There are glimmers of quality in the performances, especially from James Remar as Air Force General Francis Shaw, and Chris Chalk as a younger Dick Halloran. Yes, the same Halloran from The Shining, another King Universe crossover. Both bring gravity to an otherwise disjointed narrative. But the child actors, meant to embody the emotional core of the story, are hamstrung by thin writing. Their dialogue feels manufactured, their fears generic. In it, King's young characters, Bill, Beverly, Ben, and the rest, were messy, brave, heartbreakingly real. In Welcome to Derry, they're reduced to caricatures, vessels for manufactured sympathy rather than genuine emotion. It's a fatal flaw for a series that's supposed to explore the terror of lost innocence. Analytically, Welcome to Derry represents a broader problem in modern franchise storytelling. The obsession with prequels that answer questions no one asked. In the age of expanded universes, every shadow must have a backstory, every mystery a canonical explanation. But horror doesn't thrive on certainty. It thrives on ambiguity, on the imagination's ability to fill in the blanks. By dissecting it to death, HBO's series reduces its power. Pennywise, once an embodiment of primal fear, is now just another monster with a manual. It's a pattern familiar to viewers of countless recent spin-offs. The need to over-explain mythology until wonder evaporates. In the process, Welcome to Derry becomes less a tribute to King's legacy and more a case study in how creative overreach can drain a great story of its soul. And so, what could have been an atmospheric, character-driven horror series about a cursed town becomes an exercise in cinematic overthinking. Welcome to Derry tries to dig deeper into Stephen King's mythology, but ends up unearthing nothing but noise. The few effective scares can't mask the emptiness at its core, a series that mistakes lore for substance and spectacle for storytelling. In a media landscape already saturated with prequels, reboots, and remakes, Welcome to Derry stands as a cautionary tale. Not every mystery needs illumination. Not every monster needs an origin. King's It endures because it understands that fear is not something you explain. It's something you feel. Unfortunately, this latest adaptation does neither. What remains is a glossy, expensive ghost of a story that once terrified millions. Proof that even great nightmares can be overanalyzed until they stop being scary at all.